I think there's no question there's a concern when you look at what's happening with these protests from a coronavirus standpoint. Obviously, these protests are very meaningful and important, but the idea that the virus has somehow changed, that's not the case. The virus is still out there. It's still very contagious. So when you look at these images, a couple things to keep in mind. A lot of people are wearing masks. That's good. We know masks can have a significant impact on the spread of the virus. These protests are mostly outside, so that's also good because the virus will disperse more into the air. But people are in close proximity. They're obviously not physically distancing in some of these images, and they're staying in these positions for longer than 10 or 15 minutes. So you have many situations where you have close contact, and if people then are subsequently diagnosed with the infection, it's going to be a question, how do you go back and trace all the contacts of people in the middle of a protest? It's very hard to do. As a result, we may have a hard time ever knowing how much of an impact these protests had overall on new coronavirus infections. Keep in mind at the same time, the country is starting to reopen. So you have two of these forces happening at the same time, which is going to make it challenging. Protesters need to do their best, obviously, to try and curb the spread of this virus, and also think about after they go home. What might they do if to potentially not spread the virus to people within their family, within their community? That's all going to be sort of very important over the next several weeks. We may not know the impact of this for a few weeks as well, because between the time of exposure to the time of getting tested, the time of developing any symptoms for people who do develop symptoms, it could be several weeks, so we'll keep an eye on it. I also want to show you quickly just this map of what's happening here in the United States week to week. You get an idea of places where the number of new patients with coronavirus are increasing, where they are decreasing. And if you've been looking at these maps, you know they change quite a bit, and not just week to week, but even day to day. Also look at the graph of new coronavirus cases. And you can see here, get some idea of the overall trend line. There are some states where you've had the highest number of new infections reported. Part of that's because of increased testing, but part of that is because this virus continues to spread. So as states reopen, people are doing a reasonably good job in many places of trying to maintain that physical distance, of trying to wear masks. Hopefully that will help. And only time will tell just how much an impact. As we get more information about all this, we'll certainly bring it to you.
I will see everybody tomorrow. Please, let's go home safe.
People who have protested within the last 2 weeks are advised to get tested for COVID-19.
I do think there is a potential, unfortunately, for this to be a seeding event.
Dr. Robert Redfield, the director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, says the risk of getting infected is more likely in larger cities that haven't controlled outbreaks.
Minneapolis happens to be one, was still having significant transmission. DC is another one. We really want those individuals to highly consider being evaluated.
Although some protesters wear masks, there's minimal social distancing within the crowds, and tear gas, used occasionally by law enforcement, can make people cough and increase the likelihood of spreading the virus.
We have advocated strongly the ability to have face coverings and masks available to protesters so that they can at least have those coverings.
The CDC published a forecast Thursday that predicts more than 127,000 deaths in the U.S. by June 27th. Researchers say the data projects a decline in weekly coronavirus deaths, but that could change if the coronavirus thrives among protesters. I'm John Lawrence reporting.
New Zealand reporting 0 active coronavirus cases in the whole country for the first time since late February. The country has been praised for its early action and strict measures to battle the virus. In the last hour, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern announced the easing of all domestic restrictions. CNN's Christy Lou Stout joins us now from Hong Kong to talk more about it. Yeah, New Zealand high marks for how it handled the virus, and those actions seem to have paid off.
Absolutely. This is a significant moment, a moment to celebrate for the 5 million people who called New Zealand home, as it reports 0 active coronavirus cases, the first time since COVID-19 first arrived in New Zealand on February the 28th. This also follows 17 consecutive days of zero local new infections. And as a result, New Zealand and the government has announced it is easing its pandemic restrictions to a level 1 alert effective midnight tonight. We heard from the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern in a press conference within the last hour. Here's what she said.
New Zealanders did something remarkable in our fight to beat COVID-19. We united in unprecedented ways to crush the virus. Our lockdown was in place 26 days after our first case. Today there are no active cases in New Zealand. We have tested almost 40,000 people for COVID-19 in the past 17 days and none have tested positive. We have had no one in hospital for COVID-19 for 12 days. It's been 40 days since the last case of community transmission, 22 days since that person finished their self-isolation. And so today, I can announce that Cabinet has agreed we will now move to level 1 to get our economy fully open again.
That was Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern speaking there, announcing that her country will move to a level 1 alert system starting midnight tonight. So what does that mean? I mean, that means the end of enforced social distancing in the country. That means workplaces will reopen, schools will reopen. Previously, there was a ban on social gatherings of more than 100 people in New Zealand. That ban is no longer in place. But despite the end of strict social distancing guidelines, there will still be a ban on overseas international travelers from entering the country. In fact, during the press conference, Jacinda Ardern said that it's because of the strict border controls. That's the reason why the government can even consider relaxing these pandemic restrictions. However, there are some exemptions for certain overseas international travelers who can demonstrate that they can benefit the economy in New Zealand. And CNN has just confirmed that the Hollywood film director, James Cameron, and his crew, they have been given permission by the New Zealand government to enter the country to work on the sequel to the movie Avatar in a bid to help reboot the economy. Back to you.